This is Ukrainian show on POD TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today's guests are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
And Ivan Kucherenko, our man in Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Glad to be here today.
Okay, so the first good news today that I would like to open our show is that European Union is providing Ukraine with $2 billion in fresh help for weapons, ammunition, financial help, anything Ukraine will choose to use this money. This is excellent news. Now, it seems to me that shift in foreign policy towards Russia and Ukraine in the United States is getting fait accompli, and I think at this point you may call it irreversible change. Jonathan, how you see it?
I see it the same way you're seeing it, Sasha. President Trump has finally seen the light in the way that former President Jimmy Carter saw the light when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. I mean, before that, President Carter was taking a very charitable view of the Soviet Union, saying we should not have this inordinate fear of communism. Then, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, Jimmy's eyes were opened, and he then took very tough measures against the Soviet Union, including initiating the defense buildup. So now, just in the same way, President Trump, when he came into office, he overestimated his own ability to make a deal with the Russians because he was projecting his own beliefs. He was mirror imaging. He thought that everyone should be willing to make a deal, and that all deals were possible. Yet he did not realize that he was dealing with an individual with whom no deal could be made, who did not see things in the same way that he did. President Putin was dealing in the currency of power, and he doesn't need economic deals. He can have what, as you've stated previously, he's the richest man in the world, technically speaking. He could have whatever he wants. He's a trillionaire practically. So there is no common ground with which Trump and Putin could reasonably agree. So now that Trump has finally realized and has been shown to him the state of the Russian economy, the things that you, Ivan, and I have been examining for well over the past year, 2 years really, and that the fact that Russia's war economy is being steadily weakened, their ability to conduct offensive operations is steadily deteriorating, and the impact of drone technology, that Ukraine has essentially revolutionized warfare in the 21st century by fully exploiting drones. As a matter of fact, I saw an article recently that showed essentially the Ukrainians have turned war into a video game, where the Ukrainian soldiers are rewarded by points, just like in a video game, for destroying certain targets. You get so many targets for killing a Russian soldier, so many targets for killing vehicles, and you're rewarded. And then these points can be used by the Ukrainian units to buy other types of drones and equipment. So it's a self-sustaining system. So it's going by what works on the battlefield, and what units. If the Ukrainian leadership wants certain targets to be destroyed, they simply raise the value of the points awarded to the Ukrainian soldiers for destroying those targets. It's absolutely amazing. They have turned the war in Ukraine into a massive video game.
Jonathan, the only problem is that Russians are copying very quickly Ukrainian ersatz.
They're using cash to reward their soldiers for destroying Ukrainian targets.
Jonathan, what you said earlier, I would like to ask Ivan, if indeed Putin has $1 trillion and he doesn't travel, he cannot spend this any money basically on anything, because in Russia there is nothing really to buy. Why he wouldn't try to buy Ukraine for $1 trillion? I think it could work actually. Remember,
he tried. He gave several $billion to his great friend Medvedchuk, who promised him that he will give him Ukraine on a silver plate and that he will not have to use any force, and he told that to his soldiers. They have taken their parade costumes, some balalaikas and other bullshit, and they've actually planned to go to Kiev on parade, but as it oftenly goes with the Russians, those money were stolen. Medvedchuk was not able to give Ukraine to Putin. He was not able to influence Ukrainian people much. Of course, he got some percentage of population who sympathized Medvedchuk and his politicians, pro-Russian politicians. But that obviously was not enough to control the whole Ukraine, and that's why the Russian plan failed. And now I think that Putin will not. Even Putin doesn't have enough money to get Ukraine by money, because now it's not a matter of money. It's existential conflict, actually, when Ukrainians want to defend our independence. Ukrainians we want to actually to get justice in this war. We want to punish war criminals after everything we've seen here in Ukraine, in Bucha, in Izium, and other cities occupied by Russia. All those stories when we get our prisoners of war back, and they say and they tell those really terrifying stories about the tortures in Russia, what tortures they've encountered, and it's not a point of money anymore. It's point of justice, and in some part of the world, I can't say exactly about all the world, but in some part of the world, justice means more than money. And I hope that a lot of European politicians, I'm not sure about Donald Trump anyway, and his change of course, but for him still I think money means more than justice and more than punishing the war criminal Putin. But for Europeans mostly, justice means more than money. And that's why Ukraine will win, because justice is on our side.
No, the question of money is quite interesting. I remember before Israel came independent country, in the late 20th and 30s, before the Second World War, there was a movement of Jews coming from all kind of countries, Baltic states, Poland, Hungary, and many others, not in millions, but quite substantial number into Palestine. At that time, there was Palestine, which was a territory belonging for a long time to Turkey. And after First World War, English, UK got the mandate to govern this territory. So the Jews arriving there, so they were settling businesses or getting trades or whatever they were trying to do. And at the same time, slowly they were buying land from Arabs. And by 1947, they assembled a piece of land that was homogeneous. There were mostly Jews lived on that land. And according to decision of the United Nations, there would be two countries. One is Israel and one is Palestine. And We know the history that Israel is a fantastic, well-developed country, very strong militarily, and all the rest of Palestine, Gaza, West Bank, and all that stuff. I've been quite a few times in Israel myself. The most interesting thing is when the plane going through the Mediterranean, and then you see the land. You see the land finally, and planes start descending. So you see a part of the land is oranges, is a beautiful country, which is so pleasant to watch. And then a little bit you look at the left, nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing is growing there. No buildings. It's like a absolutely undeveloped piece of a moon property.
And I wonder who lives there.
Yeah, that's right. So, but then this is coming to the question of two states, Israeli state and Palestinian state. I don't understand the question. The Israeli state is already existing there for number of dozens of years. So you don't have to fight for creation of the Israeli state. It's already there. So
Right.
now you want to recognize Palestinian state. But where is that? Where is that Palestinian state that you want
Where is
to
its ability? Where is its ability to sustain itself?
Well, when you're talking about states or you're thinking about government, you're talking about medicine, you're talking about education system, you're talking about many things that convey the government, the way of life, and so on. It doesn't exist in Palestine, nor in Gaza or West Bank or anywhere. So you want to recognize something that doesn't exist. It's
It's a totally artificial construct.
It's construct absolutely artificial. And I'm glad that the United States and Israel, of course, are completely against it. Doesn't matter what Europeans are thinking about that. They're trying to please their electorate. It's quite obvious to me, but things are not working that way. If you want to please your electorate, dear Europeans, figure out what to do with drones from Russia. Although Russia insists that it's Ukrainian drones. They're saying that no, we have nothing to do with it. Although they found in Poland, they took some remains of the drones, and they figured out that there are indeed Russian drones. And the planes circling for 12 minutes the sky over Estonia, they're not Ukrainian planes. They're not Belarusian planes. They're not Afghanistan planes. They are Russian planes. It's just as simple as that. And Europeans now have to figure out themselves how to protect themselves. I'm not even talking about the drones over the Denmark and what kind of drones, where they came from. Apparently, now the most accepted explanation is that they were taken off from Russian platforms, a sea platform of some kind, or maybe this illegal Russian tankers taken over the Russian oil through Dutch territory, through Dutch seas. And I don't know why Europe is so lethargic as to wake up and understand what's going on. The only thing is, if you are incapable of defending yourself, you have an Ukraine. Ukraine can teach you in half an hour what to do.
Ukraine is already teaching. Ukraine military instructors now are starting their mission in Denmark in order to help military of Denmark to protect their skies against drones. But I really can't understand why not to cut off the source of those problems. Why European countries have to defend their skies against Russian invasion when they can do everything just to stop Russian invade into their skies by shooting down their planes, showing that they can be powerful in case of danger, by pressuring Russia with economic sanctions, by stopping trade with Russia at last, because European countries they're still continue to buy Russian goods and bring money to Russia. And now Russia is making using those money. Russia is making drones not only to launch them over Ukrainian sky, but also to launch them over European sky by trying to find how the weakness in European defense and show all Russian allies to China, to North Korea, to Iran, that Europe is weak, that NATO is weak, that Europe cannot protect themselves against such kind of hybrid attacks when there is no specific strict attack of Russian tanks over European borders. These are some drones, some planes. Russians are saying that these are not our drones, not our planes. Like they were saying, those were not our soldiers in Crimea or no our soldiers in Donbass in 2014. Oh no! They bought uniforms, military uniforms, and weapons in some grocery store. They are not Russians. It's
Do you
some kind
remember
of green men. Green men. No
what
Russian.
they were saying in Russian? Ich tam nету. When
Yeah.
Russians were accused that, okay, there are your soldiers or operatives or so on. It started, I think, even in Crimea. It was in Syria for some time or so on. So they were answering, "Ich tam nету." So they're not there. That's what they were saying. Now Europeans, they won't create an appearance of good boys and girls. Look, okay, there are drones, there is this or that, but we are good people. We haven't done anything. We didn't destroy any drones or any plane or nothing. So why are you torturing us? Leave us alone, please.
And they are not learning the lesson that Winston Churchill pointed out in his writings when he said that the one thing that the Russians respect more than anything else is strength. And there is nothing for which they have more contempt than weakness, particularly military weakness. So once someone needs to point out to the various Europeans, remember what Winston Churchill said? Yeah, it is just as true now as it was way back then. So now the Europeans have to learn the lesson, even more of a lesson than President Trump has had to learn. And you notice that President Trump has, in effect, authorized or said to encourage Ukraine to attack Moscow with ATACMS. And it is making arrangements to increase their production of these long-range missiles. In the defense industry in the United States, the Secretary of Defense is directing these various defense contractors to increase their production of various types of missiles, because they realize that they are going to need many more of these. And just as the U.S. military is now taking lessons essentially from the Ukrainian military, as Ivan pointed out, there are no doubt Ukraine is making arrangements to teach the U.S. military leaders, to teach them the use of drones and the sharing of the technology. So all of this is a process. It is not going to take place just at the snap of one's fingers, but the Europeans and the Americans are learning their lesson, and they are shifting their policies and their actions in favor of Ukraine. It's all part of the correlation of forces that I've spoken of in previous episodes. That this is continuing to move in favor of Ukraine, and the pressure is steadily increasing on Russia.
Jonathan, don't you think that this today, this meeting of all generals of the United States in Hexer and Donald Trump, it's about a new doctrine of fighting the war of 21st century and what has to be readjusted, what has to be improved, and so on? Or there's some other agenda as well?
Well, I would say there are probably other agendas as part of this whole thing. Secretary Hegseth has talked about instilling a new warrior ethos in the U.S. military. And I would suggest that what Secretary Hegseth needs to instill as part of that warrior ethos is a greater emphasis on the study of military history, greater emphasis on study of not just U.S. military history, but all military history, and instituting in conjunction with this greater emphasis on the use of drones and how to use them. They would do well to institute a greater emphasis on wargaming, on the use of war games, which the Germans did quite extensively especially after World War One, and they did a lot of wargaming before and during World War II. Not entirely successfully. They should have paid more attention to their war games, otherwise they would not have done some of the things that they did. But the use of the wargaming process, what is very useful about it is that a good, well-constructed war game can show you what can go wrong with your strategy. It can show you the things that can go wrong. And it also, under certain circumstances, can show you the reasons why you ought not to undertake a certain war or military conflict at all. So it is capable of teaching those kinds of lessons. So Secretary Hegseth, with his meeting with those senior military leaders, yes, there are a number of changes that he is wanting to instill so the U.S. military is better prepared to wage the wars of the 21st century. But part of that, while he is still open to suggestions, there are certain additions that he can make, such as to prepare the U.S. military intellectually for the wars of the 21st century, to get the proper mindset as to how they need to approach it, and they need to be humble enough to learn from those who have actually fought or actually fighting the wars, such as the Ukrainians. And so far, the U.S. military seems to be open to these lessons and will probably be very willing students should the Ukrainian military decide to come out and give instruction.
That's very good development. And I would like to mention, when we discussed Europeans, I would like to emphasize that there are two kinds of Europeans. There are continental old Europe, and there is a newest Eastern Europe, which is Baltic states, Poland, Romania, possibly, Czech Republic, possibly. And the number one country of these is definitely Poland. And Poland didn't mince their words to Russians. They said that whatever plane or drone will cross the border of Poland will be shot down without any warnings. Okay? And that's exactly what Erdogan from Turkey, he did that. And what was Russian reaction? They were crying, they were making all kind of notes, diplomatic notes, and they were crying.
Squeezing Turkish tomatoes. They were squeezing Turkish tomatoes.
Sometimes they wouldn't buy Turkish tomatoes.
We're going to write you very nasty letters.
What's the difference between Turkish tomatoes and Bulgarian tomatoes? Nobody knows. I think Turkish are probably bigger, better, and less expensive. But however, that was the punishment of Turkey. So, but interestingly enough, that plane was in Turkish airspace for 17 seconds. Okay? And since then, there were no more Russian planes in Turkish airspace, never. Okay, so this is the Jonathan, what you just mentioned, that Russians understand only power. This is far the biggest and best example of that.
And they should take heed to that example and insist that standing up to the Russian military invasions forcefully from the very beginning is the best guarantee of peace. Like the ancient Romans once said, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, that in the last couple of days, when United States announced the Ukraine can now hit any target on Russian territory. And they didn't even emphasize, okay, except Kremlin in Moscow and Winter in St. Petersburg. They didn't even do that. So they implied just any target on Russian territory. They are sending now a new weapons, and they said exactly what they're producing now with the purpose of sending it to Ukraine. So normally when you see this so-called Russian propagandist show like Solovyov and some others, normally they were screaming how they will crush Ukraine in a matter of a week. Oh, the most interesting saying what they use is, we haven't even started. You will see if we really start the real war against Ukraine, you will see it will be over in 3 days, or maybe 3 weeks, or maybe 3 months, or 35 months, or 100 years. Nobody knows exactly.
Yes.
Now,
And basically,
in the last couple of days, yesterday, they were very somber. They were talking about, they have one general, I forgot his name. Funny name, I forgot. So he was saying that don't forget that Ukraine, as of now, without this newest weapons, is a very strong army. It's an army that you cannot just defeat because you wanted to in 3 days or 3 months. This is a very potent army, experienced army. It's more difficult to find than many other European countries. So you, in order to defeat Ukraine, or maybe it's impossible, so you have to make some kind of peace. But if you're trying to overcome Ukraine and win, you need total mobilization. And you cannot go into total mobilization, it will be disaster for Putin. There are not enough men in Russia as of now. A lot of people moved out of country. A lot of people went to front lines, and they're no longer with us or with them, depends what you're talking about. But they're not around. Let's put it this way. So this was very somber assessment, and I never heard it on this propagandist Russian channels. Ivan, have you looked at these channels for some time?
Actually, rarely, because you really need have to possess a strong psychological defense in order to watch all those propaganda bullshit and zombifying their population. But in Russia, everything is possible, and I don't know.
Well, the thing is, you hit the point exactly. When watching these Russia propaganda shows, it's like walking through a minefield, except that when watching Russian shows, instead of needing a mine detector, you need a bullshit detector, because there is a lot in those shows that can be described in no other way. So, just a word to the wise.
Well, Russians, a long time ago, I think even back in 30s, they developed one appliance that doesn't exist in any other country. I'm not aware of it. The name of that in Russian is Govnomir. In English, it's you measure the level of shit. Why would you need to do that? Because in Russian, let's just have all kinds of sanatoriums or some dom отдыха, how to say, it's a place where people would renew their energies and so on, what they call it. And they didn't have normal canalization. So they had all the shit was going to a certain place, and there was a level of, say, kind of a level of weight that it would go down, and once it would reach the sheet would reach certain level, then that weight would not go any lower because it would be already on the level of sheet. So that would indicate that they have to they need some help to remove that and to hide it or move it to another location or something like this. This is something unique that, in my opinion, at least I'm not aware that any other country ever had. Ivan, do you think any country would have something like this?
Probably. I don't know actually how it works.
We are entering new territory here.
Yeah.
Unexplored territory.
Unexplored. By the way, I've got a video, so if we have some time, we can watch it right now. It's about Crimea and what Jonathan likes always to tell us about. So I think we can watch it right now.
Excellent.
The Ukrainian General Staff methodically listed S-300, S-350, and S-400. Dozens of launchers of these systems were destroyed, along with more than 15 radar stations and over 10 command points. All this is Russian air defense, and only in Russian-occupied Crimea. How did the Ukrainians manage this? And what are they preparing for by focusing specifically on these targets? Crimea is one of Putin's main trophies. But recently it has turned into a problem. The once formidable Black Sea Fleet has already lost over a third of its ships. Military airfields regularly suffer from a deadly combination of aerial drones and Western long-range missiles. According to British intelligence, Russians will be forced to disperse their aviation to protect it from new strikes. But why have the Ukrainians recently concentrated on somewhat different targets? Belbek, Sevastopol, Chornomorske, Yevpatoria, Jankoy, Tarkhankut, Saki, Donske, Mysove, Alushta, Mount Aipetri. This is not a travel route through the occupied Crimea, at least not yet. This is a list of places in Crimea where Ukrainian forces have successfully destroyed air defense systems in the last month and a half. Additionally, Ukrainian forces also disabled 4 Russian S-300 systems in the Belgorod region using HIMARS. Ukrainian successes in Crimea have become possible in particular thanks to the finally coordinated supply of American ATACMS missiles, able to reach any target on the peninsula. Combined with drones and other missiles, they systematically pierce the Russian defenses, striking the very air defense systems designed to intercept these missiles. Why do Ukrainians need clean skies over Crimea so much? Well, you have probably heard this name more than once, the F-16. The Institute for the Study of War explained that Ukrainian forces are purposely weakening Russia's air defense capabilities ahead of receiving these fighters. Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway have pledged to provide Ukraine with around 80 F-16s. The commander of the Dutch Air Force, General Arnoud Stallman, stated that they would go on their first combat missions this summer. The country's defense minister, Kajsa Ollongren, added that Ukraine will be allowed to use its F-16 fighters for attacks on targets on Russian territory. So what does this mean? Ukrainians are systematically destroying enemy aviation and particularly enemy air defenses wherever they can reach, primarily in Crimea. Soon Ukraine will receive its first F-16s along with trained pilots and technical personnel. And then Russian Sus and MiGs will face American fighters in the air. The very ones that can do much more than the outdated Soviet aircraft Ukraine has desperately tried to protect its skies with. Russians understand this plan too. They are pulling new air defense systems into Crimea. Additionally, according to British intelligence, Russian long-range aviation has already shifted the focus of its cruise missile strikes to Ukrainian air bases, all to protect the peninsula and other territories from future F-16 attacks. So far, they're doing poorly. The war in Ukraine is entering a new phase, which could be decisive for occupied Crimea and for the entire course of the war.
Don't you just love it when a plan comes together?
Fantastic. And Russians,
Yes,
I saw some pictures, they're still flying this Tu-95. It's a plane from the 50s.
yes. I
Was
mean, that was the only. Well, keep in mind, even then, the Tu-95, that was the first bomber that they had that could reach the United States without refueling. Yeah, before that they had the Tu-4, which could only in the 1950s could only reach the United States by one-way missions. And so right now, but the fact that Tu-95, that's the best they've got.
Yeah, but
And
even at that time in the 50s, US already had the interceptors that would make
oh
its
yes,
one-way trip final and not useful very
they
much.
and of course the United States at that time in the 1950s, they had the Nike Hercules, which was a very interesting, simple concept. It was an air defense missile that was and only Soviet bombers could only come through at high altitude on one-way missions. So the U.S. concept was very simple. Nike Hercules could carry a nuclear warhead. You just simply fire that thing into the middle of a group of Soviet bombers and set off the nuclear warhead. No more bombers. So that would have been the concept. So and there's nothing the Soviets could have done about that. But now you have this. It's very interesting to watch this process because what the Ukrainians are doing over Crimea by systematically dismantling the air defense systems, and those F-16s will provide the necessary air superiority over Crimea, which will support any future Ukrainian counteroffensive to retake the Crimea. And the key moment, and despite the fact that the Kerch Bridge, as you pointed out earlier, would be very useful for future Ukrainian offensives into, say, to take Kuban, the Ukrainians may not be thinking in those terms just yet. They may be thinking in terms of just cut off the Crimea, isolate the Russians so that we can retake the Crimea, and then we'll worry about rebuilding the bridge if we need to, for any future operations. But right now, all the foundation is being constructed for a future, my projection, for a future Ukrainian counteroffensive to retake the Crimea. All of the pieces are being put together in place, and this will be the decisive moment of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
This reminds me, that from the history of Second World War, the Stalingrad battle, it started on November 19th, 1942. What happened on that day? That Russians started enormous artillery attack against Germans with the aviation, and for a few days they did nothing but weakening Germans' position, and they used Katyusha and psychological warfare. So when they finally moved their army against Germans were already in panic, and they were considerably weakened, and all that. I think it was over by beginning of 2nd of February 1943. It was all done and over with, and Paulus had to resign.
And what made it even worse for the Germans is, you remember, during 1942, the Germans were already so short of manpower that they had to bring in their Hungarian and Italian allies to provide troop support on the flanks of the German offensive towards Stalingrad.
The Russians are bringing North Koreans. It's about Italians and
Hungary was on the wrong side of history at that time again, like they're now by siding with Russia. Hopefully Italy joins. That time Italy joined the right part of good guys company.
They got smarter. They got smarter in 1943 when they surrendered.
That's right. Gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for today's program. I think we covered a lot of ground, and I think the initiative is on our side, and our program is the only one for the last 3.5 years talking about Ukrainian victory. And we never had any doubts about that. And now more and more people listen to what we have to say.
I think that is absolutely marvelous. And the fact that President Trump isn't, in looking at his post on Truth Social, he is essentially agreeing with what we have been saying. His advisors apparently, perhaps maybe Fox Network, managed to forward, says, "Hey, have you heard what these guys have been saying?" And they said, they could be right. And so, who knows? Maybe some very smart people have been forwarding our program to the right people, and the right people are now listening. So I think that is a very positive sign.
Thank you, guys, and see you on Friday, same place, same time. And Slava Ukraini.
God bless
Героям
America.
слава. Thank you. Bye-bye.
US and Canada. Bye-bye, everyone.